It's The Weekly Show with David J. Maloney. This week, David talks to meteorologist Alan Seals. And now, here's your host, David J. Maloney.
Welcome to everyone at home, and I would normally say our studio audience to The Weekly Show. I am your host, David J. Maloney. I say normally because we would usually shoot the show before a small studio audience at the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino, but we are still shooting from home due to coronavirus concerns. And because we are still shooting from home, filling in for our house band, the Mogiles, again with me tonight is my son, Gianni. So let's see, the White House kitchen staff is supposedly struggling to adjust to the new administration. Apparently they're not accustomed to having served dinner at 4 p.m. And reclusive British business mogul David Barclay has passed away at the age of 86. To give you an idea of how reclusive he was a no-show at his funeral. In Madrid, Spain, a woman made the news when she was arrested with 4 pounds of cocaine hidden in her breast implants. The good news is she's now engaged to Lamar Odom. Oh, and last week, a Georgia teenager was accused of stealing nearly $1 million from a grocery store. Even more outrageous, he was caught in the 10 items or less lane. And this week, the AMC movie theater chain reopened dozens of its cinemas in Illinois and Wisconsin. But they are taking the coronavirus precautions very seriously. To ensure their theaters get filled to less than 25% of capacity to comply with COVID restrictions, they're now only showing Nicolas Cage movies. Speaking of movies, a happy belated birthday to Exorcist actress Linda Blair. She just turned 62, and she's still a head-turner. Experts are saying to build up your immune system during the pandemic, you need to take lots of vitamins D, C, and zinc. I take so many supplements now that when I pass gas, it smells like the inside of a GNC store. On this week's show, we've got the Gulf Coast's very own nationally acclaimed meteorologist, NBC15's Alan Seals. When Alan was on the show last time, he was in between gigs. But he's now back on the air on NBC15. Tonight, we're going to be chatting about his move to NBC, the crazy hurricane season we just experienced, and what we might expect weather-wise this upcoming year. So don't go anywhere, and we'll be right back. G? And we are back. Our featured guest tonight is someone who our viewers already know very, very well. His accomplishments in the field of meteorology have become legendary because of the internet. And now he's back on the air at NBC15. And we are so glad to have him back. Please welcome back a good friend of the show and fellow New Yorker, Alan Seals. Alan, good to have you back.
Well, great to be back, and look how fast time has moved since I was last here.
Oh, geez, yeah. A bunch has happened since you were last on the show. How have you been?
Actually, I'm doing great. I'm great. My family's great. We are being healthy. We are being conscientious about our environment, and the new job is great, too.
How has life changed for someone in the newscasting industry since the beginning of COVID? Because I understand doing the weather, you don't have as many opportunities as some of your colleagues to have to be out there and just putting a mic in front of somebody and interviewing them and going back and forth with a mic. But how has that changed overall?
Well, COVID changed everything in life. Right after I started at NBC15, which was just over a year ago now, 2 months later we hit COVID. And coincidentally, the week before we basically started our lockdowns, my station had just given us all software so we could work from home. I mean, it was a pure coincidence. So literally, the first week that we were told, don't come to work, stay at home, I was able to do everything from home that I've always done at work. And that was a big change.
Well, to some extent, but during your sabbatical, for lack of a better way of putting it, and when you were in between gigs, you were doing still some things on social media from home anyway, no?
Right. So what's amazing to me after being in this business for, I was just counting it up, it's almost 34 years, is technology has made everything shrink down. The internet has given me all the data, just about all the data I need. So I can do what I do at work at home. It's not always as easy as it is at home, but it can be done. And even on the road, much of my sabbatical, I was out of the Mobile area, but I was still doing weather for Mobile on social media from where I was on my smartphone.
So did meteorologists get classified as essential workers?
Well, actually, I have just learned that in a sense we are, because the media is in the third class of folks to get the COVID vaccine. So we are kind of essential.
So last time we talked, your future was still open as to your next career move. Now you're in NBC15, and we're so glad to have you back on the air. How have you enjoyed getting back in the game at a new station, and what has it been like? Are stations that much different from each other? I mean...
No, we're all structured the same way, and my station is owned by a corporate parent, just like my previous station was. So you have local management, local people, you have corporate people telling the local people, here's how you should do things in so many words. And it's the same workflow, it's the same philosophy of journalism, news, and weather. So it's very much the same. Different people. Overall, I am happy where I am. It's a good bunch of people. And what's also funny is, back to COVID, I started in early January, and it was mid-March that the building cleared out. So I hardly got to meet a lot of the people I work with. And now if I were to see them, I wouldn't know them because everyone's wearing a mask, if they're even in the building.
So during your time off, did you get a chance to travel much at all?
I did some travel. Most of it was just taking care of home business, family business, but not as much as I wanted to fun travel.
Well, and then the reason why I ask is because, when people travel, I wonder if, from your perspective, dealing with weather so often, if you look at travel in a slightly different way than the rest of us. Like, does it become weather tourism for you when you travel?
Always. If I have a conference, I will go out early to the conference if it's somewhere else in the country, specifically just to spend a few days doing weather photography. When I visit family, which my family's scattered all around the country, they wonder, well, why is he getting up at 5 in the morning? It's because I want to go see the sunrise. So yes, it is always a part of what I do wherever I am.
Now, I've always wondered, and I'm sure some of our viewers do, and some of the people who follow you as well, what does a day in the life of a meteorologist look like?
So for me, it's different depending on whether you work the evening shift, the morning shift. What's unique about my schedule is I work the evening shift. So I go to work at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm not really done with my workday until at least 11 in the evening. But my day starts at 10 a.m., so I wake up late because if I were to get up early, I'd be tired by the 10 o'clock news. So I'm up at 10 a.m. Literally within the first 3 minutes of getting up, I'm looking out the window because I'm trying to figure out, is the forecast what I said it would be, which it usually is. Every once in a while, though, it's like, that's not what I said. During the morning, my morning is like most people's evenings. I'm going to the grocery store, I'm paying bills, I'm taking care of the house, taking care of the yard. I'm also, though, jumping on the computer to check in with my COVID compliance form for both my full-time job and my part-time job at South. I teach a meteorology course there. Along with that, I'm preparing for the job and the other job, making a preliminary forecast. Social media, boy, that thing, it's a double-edged sword. It's great, but it's a 24/7. So I'll check in with that, and then I'll head to work by 2 in the afternoon. The workday, once I hit the door, boy, it's nonstop for about 3 hours between social media, meetings, radio, making the forecast, making the graphics, recording things for one of our other channels. So it's actually a lot that happens. The one thing that's kind of out of the mix right now is school visits, which back in the old days, a year ago, I would go to a school every week or speak at a Rotary Club or something like that. So that has pretty much ended. Although I still do virtual visits, which the fun part about that is I don't have to drive 45 minutes to an hour to get somewhere. I just get in front of the camera and bring up my PowerPoint. Most days are pretty routine. It's those severe weather days where I know in advance that I'll be working a 12-hour day. So I take snacks, I take food, and I prepare to be there for the long haul. And then there are those days where I get home at 11 o'clock and there might be a tornado warning at 12:30 in the morning. I get dressed, go back to work, go on TV, and come back home again, hopefully not too long after that.
Do you have the ability to, like with a green screen, if something happened, like just set up, a green screen in your home with even any kind of makeshift camera? So if you did have an emergency thing, it could just be boom right there. They could link to you. You could Google Drive it straight to them or something like that.
Right. I didn't go that far in my setup, in part because I don't have the space to set up, because the camera has to be really far away from the green wall. I do have monitors where I can stand in front of a monitor. And then, of course, I can do the equivalent of a Skype or a Facebook or
sure, like
other software that allows me to be seen in the graphics right next to me. So, yeah, we can pretty much do all that.
So here's what I want to do. We need to go to a break, something you're used to. And then when we come back, I really would like to talk to you about the 2020 hurricane season and what we might be able to consider or possibly expect in 2021. So can you stick around until after the break?
Certainly.
Thank you. We will be right back after the break with meteorologist Alan Seals. And we are back with meteorologist Alan Seals. Now, before the break, we were talking, you mentioned extreme weather. Now, you were at NBC15 for the 2020 hurricane season, which was one of the craziest on records.
Yes.
Were there any indications early it was going to be that crazy? And do we see any of those similar indications for this upcoming year?
Yeah, so the 2020 season for me was almost like 10 hurricane seasons rolled into one. I guess it really was for everybody. Personally, I don't do long-range outlooks or forecasts, but as you hear, Colorado State does them, the Weather Channel, AccuWeather. There are dozens of companies and businesses and countries that put out the forecasts. So as we approach the start of 2020 for the hurricane season, almost all the forecasts or outlooks were for an above-average hurricane season. They're not specific to a county or a city or even a coastline. They're for the entire Atlantic. So we kind of had the sense that the season would be above average, but nobody had the clue that it would be record-setting. And when you forecast weather, whether it's a human or a computer, it's based on what you know has happened in the past. That's your database. So to try to predict something that has never happened before it's almost impossible, because it's just not something you can conceive of because it never happened before. But sure enough, it turned out to be a record-breaking season. We had, I believe it was 9 named storms in the Gulf of Mexico throughout the whole season.
How does El Nino and El Nina play into the whole thing? Because I've seen stuff on that, but I don't know if everybody completely understands it. And how does that play into the whole, number of storms per year thing?
Yeah, and even for the meteorologists, even when we understand the concept, it doesn't always play out. So there are a couple of things I think people heard going into 2020. They heard Saharan Dust, which is a big deal coming off of Africa. And then every hurricane season, you might hear El Nino, La Nina. So the Saharan Dust, to start with that was also record. A huge amount of dust was blown off the continent of Africa into the Atlantic, traveled all the way to the Gulf Coast. And what we know in general is that when you get a lot of dust in the atmosphere, it tends to limit tropical storms and hurricanes. It doesn't stop them, but it tends to limit them. And what we saw this past season was that all happened in June and July, and then the dust stopped. So that didn't help us, obviously. The other issue, of course, is El Nino and La Nina. And El Nino is when the Pacific Ocean is warmer than average, it tends to create a lot more wind shear in the Atlantic Ocean, which tends to cut down hurricanes. So we hope for an El Nino, but even when you get them, you can still get some big hurricanes.
And how does, obviously the concept of climate change has become kind of a politically charged discussion. But, when you do have warmer temperatures, whether it be
from pollution or just natural events, to get out of the political aspect of it, warmer temperatures do bring stronger storms. True?
Not necessarily. What you're saying is what most people would think. So here's what we know. Warmer means more energy available. Warmer means more water vapor in the air, which is fuel. So you definitely increase the ingredients for hurricanes and tropical storms. It's just not certain whether you get stronger storms or you get more storms that are not as strong, or you get storms that are a little stronger but briefer. So there's just so many different little variables to strength, duration, number, intensity, track, that we still just don't know. We're really watching and trying to figure it out.
Well, they said that in Navarre there was a 5.5-foot surge, and I do know that it seemed to come in when the tide was higher. But I can tell you this: my place is 10 feet 2 inches above sea level, and it got within 1 inch of coming inside the house. I have video of 3 people surfing into my neighbor's backyard.
Okay.
I kid you not, kids surfing into his grass.
And you made a good point there about what the official number is and what your number is. And your number, obviously, as you described, it's higher than the official number. And that's our problem as a society. We don't have all that data that people have sometimes, so we don't know what really happened. We just know what the official gauge showed us.
Now, for our local Alabama viewers, how do we kind of explain the shifting that Sally exhibited? Because that was kind of a... Go ahead.
Yeah. So the first thing is I try to remind people that we give you a forecast, and the forecast cone does this, and then it does that, and then it does that. But the storm isn't following the forecast. The forecast is trying to keep up with what the storm is doing and then what it does, and then you recalculate, and then it moves and you recalculate. So we're constantly trying to reproject something that we can barely get our hands around. So the issue with Sally was it moved to a spot where the steering winds were so light that the computer models couldn't figure out which way it was going to start moving. I mean, that's the shortest version of it. And then by the time they recalculated, which took about a day, then we realized, oh, it's going to be the Gulf Coast, or Mobile Bay, Bowen County, not Louisiana, not Mississippi. And that was tough for everybody, for forecasters, for cities and communities, because it takes so much time and effort to prepare and move people and get people to move their vehicles from that 5.5-foot storm surge. So that was our big problem with Sally. It just got to a spot where it stalled, and when it stalls, it's like, okay, where is it going now?
Not go anywhere. As a meteorologist, what are the most concerning weather patterns or phenomena that you're seeing kind of globally and maybe even locally?
The overall, my biggest concern really is not the weather pattern. It's the population growth of people who don't remember the last time that same sort of storm happened. So people lose their memory of, oh, this is what a Category 2 can do. Or, yes, this is what a tornado can do to a mobile home when you haven't had one in a really long time. And honestly, for as much as there are all sorts of changes in global weather patterns, which I still don't know if it's a steady change or a zigzag change, the biggest constant change is population growth. And next to that, the biggest constant change is aging infrastructure. And the two of those lead to all sorts of problems whenever we have any sort of storm.
So you've been covering weather for, like you said, a really long time now. Have you noticed any changes through your own observations as you've been working these past few decades? Is it just from a scientific standpoint of what tools are available to us now?
That's a big point of it. Also, the really big change, and I know it sounds like I'm protecting weather and blaming everyone else, but the biggest change is TV, cable, satellite, social media. When I was a kid, if you had a tornado, you might read about it in the newspaper a day or two later. Now you have a tornado, you're watching it from a helicopter on your smartphone, even if it's not hitting anybody's home. So we see all these little weather events that have always happened. It's just we didn't have it pushed right in front of our face from multiple channels and media outlets and smartphones and social media. So it's the communication of weather has exploded, for better or worse, mostly for better, because it does raise awareness. But then there's also a little miscommunication of weather, which social media sometimes lets things go sideways by mistake. Even things that are real are taken out of context, and then people don't believe it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, like you said, with a phone, it's like we all have our own little weather alert radio with us now. So,
Yes.
you know, I can't tell you the number of times this past summer I would get a tornado warning and we'd be like, okay, we're all going down into our safe area, you know,
Right.
And huddle down for, 15 or 30 minutes or whatever it is. Whereas before you used to have the little Radio Shack, and then the guy would come on, and that would be and it was always the same kind of voice, you know what I mean?
Right.
That's
right.
It was like, a tornado has been seen at, So, I'll end on a trivia question. In terms of weather and meteorology, is there an experiment or equation or invention that if someone cracked it would just completely revolutionize the field right now?
No.
Well, that was easy.
But what would revolutionize the field, and here's where I might sound like a politician, it's investment into research and technology for better detecting of weather and for better study to learn and understand weather. So like so many things in the natural world, we don't, just like medicine, if you want to beat cancer, you've got to invest into cancer research. And that's really the bottom line, is investment.
And at the end of the day, people initially think of weather from a standpoint of, is it going to be sunny? Is it going to be rainy? Do I need to bring my umbrella? Do I need to wear a jacket? But at the end of the day, the importance of being able to properly forecast weather can save lives and can have a huge savings, like you said, on infrastructure, buildings, dare I say even the insurance industry, which are never been my friends. But still, at the end of the day, those are all things that help us all as local communities, statewide, and even nationally.
You said it exactly. It directly drives transportation, recreation, vacation, you name it. The whole world is tied to weather in one way or another.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Alan. I hate the fact that we're out of time. We always seem to have a bunch to talk about, and I still even had more, but we only have so much time allotted to us. So thank you so much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen, Alan Seals.
Thank you.
That's our show for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. A special thanks to meteorologist Alan Seals for joining us. Taking us home tonight, still sitting in for our house band, the Mogiles, my son, Gianni.